As the coronavirus pandemic has reignited calls for more international cooperation, the spotlight has turned to China-U.S. relations. Last week, 100 Chinese scholars signed an open letter declaring that, quote, respecting science, cherishing life and protecting people from harm should be our shared goals in the global fight against COVID-19. A day later, members of the U.S. foreign policy elite responded in kind, issuing their own letter calling on Washington and Beijing to work together. As the crisis escalates, will China and the U.S. join hands amid hardship, and what might bilateral cooperation look like in concrete terms? I'm pleased to be joined via Skype by Professor Goldstein from Harvard's Fairbank Center for Chinese Studies, and by phone in Beijing, Professor Su Hao, Director of the Center for Strategic and Peace Studies at China's Foreign Affairs University. He's also a signatory to the Chinese Open Letter. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. And Professor Su, let me go to you. And I want to start by reading just a paragraph from the Chinese letter, which is titled An Open Letter to the People of the United States from 100 Chinese Scholars. And it says, among other things, facing the most dangerous infectious disease in a century, politicized criticisms help neither China, the United States, nor the world to curb the spread of the virus. We are grateful for the support of the international community, including donations from American friends during the most critical stage of the fight. We respect the epidemic containment programs and policies implemented by other countries according to their national conditions, and we're willing to share our experiences with other countries and provide all available assistance to them. So, Professor Su, what messages are you and other 99 Chinese scholars trying to send by this letter? What makes it compelling for you as a group to send such a letter and call for cooperation?
Actually, I'm one of the undersigned scholars in the Chinese letter, actually. So within this letter, in China's letter or the American letters, I have to say that even though these two letters have some difference in the voice, but generally speaking, I would say that we share quite a lot of common ground with each other by both sides. The first, I would say, both sides, shares their concern about the common, enemy or crisis to our human beings from this coronavirus. So this is common ground for China and the United States to work together. Second, both sides argues that it's not necessary for both sides tangled with the differences and problems between us, but we should much more focus on the joint effort for this, work together against the coronavirus. So it is a critical point for both sides. And the third, I would say that both sides stress that China already got successful in the past anti-coronavirus virus, and the United States would like to share the Chinese experiences about this successful behavior. And the fourth, but is most important from these two letters, I would say that both sides would like to express their willing to encourage China and the United States, not only the state level, official level, but also the society level, business level, to work together, join together against the coronavirus. So this is very important discussion.
Professor Goldstein, when did you first see the Chinese letter? Have you read the Chinese letter? And what do you think the general reaction is from the American academic circle or foreign policy elite circle towards this Chinese open letter?
Well, I can't speak for the American elite or policy level, but I would emphasize firstly that the letter from the American side was not a response to the Chinese letter. It had been started before the Chinese letter was known. And secondly, I would emphasize that Professor Su used the word voice. The voice in the American letter is much different from the voice in the Chinese letter. The American letter includes critical comments about China's behavior in regard to the virus, and also China's general behavior on the international scene. Those more negative comments were not included in the Xinhua dispatch that came out of Washington, but they're very important for understanding the real significance of the American statement.
Yeah,
because
yeah, let me just familiarize
okay.
people. Let me just familiarize people with both the positive messages and the negative messages that you mentioned in that letter. First of all, this letter was entitled "Saving Lives in America, China, and Around the World." That's a statement organized by Asia Society Center on U.S.-China Relations and the 21st Century China Center at UC San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy. And the letter, among other things, says no effort against the coronavirus, whether to save American lives at home or combat the disease abroad, will be successful without some degree of cooperation between the U.S. and China. Through forums like the G20, the U.S. can work to develop a framework for a shared global response. And it also says recent steps taken in Washington and Beijing suggest that both governments appreciate the significance of this momentum and are taking some initial steps together. The purpose of this statement is to encourage further steps in that direction. And as Professor Goldstein mentioned, there are also a voice of criticism about the Chinese side, saying that China has much to answer for its initial response to the coronavirus, its initial cover-up, its continuing lack of transparency, its failure to cooperate fully with the U.S. and international medical authorities, its blatant propaganda campaign to shift the blame for the crisis to the U.S. Notwithstanding, we, the undersigned, believe the logic for cooperation is compelling. So, Professor Goldstein, help us understand, what do you think this letter really intend to do? It's calling for cooperation, fine, calling on what China and the United States can do, but on the other hand is also giving some very strong criticism of the Chinese side. Is that going to help the Chinese side come to the cooperation table, or is that going to harden some bitter feelings between the two sides?
Well, I don't know whether it'll help or harm, but you've got to understand that the people who have signed this petition have very, very different views of the current nature of Sino-American relations and also the possibilities for the future. And the way that they were gotten together to sign this appeal, which is for cooperation, was to include both criticisms of China's behavior in regard to the virus, as well as general comments about the differences in the international scene. What you've got is a number of very prominent people, but also very prominent people who differ seriously on the future of Sino-American relations, but for the moment are coming together on the issue of cooperation. It's only, to use a Chinese term, it's almost 统一战线, united front of people with very differing views, who have gotten together to advocate for cooperation.
Nevertheless,
now,
do you believe that this is going to facilitate, this is going to help the two sides come together, at least for the time being? And please keep it short, Professor Goldstein.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I don't know. None of these people have changed their more general views about the future of Sino-American relations. The problems that exist today in Sino-American relations are not going to go away. This could be a first step, or it could be a momentary coming together to face a common problem.
Yeah.
We don't know.
All right. Let me have Professor Su Hao have his take on the possible next steps between the two sides. We are, however, seeing some, actions, some steps taken between the two sides. For instance, China facilitating the donation of 1,000 ventilators from Shanghai to New York, and and Ambassador Cui Tiankai, China's ambassador to the United States, also coming out making quite a positive message to the American people. So, Professor Su Hao, how do you look at the situation from here moving ahead? Are you going to see more positive sign coming up? If so, what has to be done? Really briefly, please.
Well, verbally, it seems to me that the atmosphere between China and the United States is some problematic. Some kind of differences, some kind of criticism, with each other. Mm-hmm. But in reality, actually, at the moment, the United States is facing big challenges from coronavirus. And China also did the same in last month. Mm. So both sides are normally shared common ground to join work together, like Prof. Goldstein say that to work together against coronavirus.
All right.
In this reality, yeah. China and the United States already work together at the moment. For example, China already donates quite a lot medical products, facilities to the United States, in particular to New York State. And also, China's already prepared to ship to the United States by the commercial way with the supplies of the medicals, products. So
we have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Su. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to Professor Su Hao and Professor Stephen Goldstein. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. I hope you've got the point. Thanks for watching.